and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. This is episode 42, and in this episode, I'll be sharing with you on the topic of emotional safety and why it's needed for a happier marriage and what you can do about if you're not experiencing that right now, what you can do about that, right? So here's what I find, that so many spouses are doing so much. Maybe it's what you're doing to have your marriage do better and to feel happier in their marriages, right? They're getting therapy, coaching, going to retreats, and buying the latest guru's suggestion as to what would make their marriages happier, and still are coming up short. Have that been your experience? Do you know anybody who's been doing that? Here's what I find, that when that is the focus, and trying to say, what else can I add to get my marriage happier? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe it is the wrong approach, or maybe it's the approach that needs to be re-examined, because there's nothing inherently wrong with those things, right? Coaching, retreats, getting therapy. I'm all for that, because I offer coaching. I offer counseling as a therapist, and I also have programs as well. But what I've seen is that the most important thing that a spouse need is either not being taught or not being sought, right? Not being taught or not being sought, no fault of your own or the spouse's own, because he or she may not know otherwise. And what really is most important is creating an emotional safe space, because that is a foundation on which a happy marriage, or a marriage that lasts, is built. It's a necessity. It's a prerequisite for a marriage to last, much less to have a happier marriage. And that's what you'll hear more about in this episode of the Happier Marriage Secrets. Now, today's episode, as you'll see in a moment, is the audio from a YouTube video broadcast I did. And it is doing well there on the YouTube channel. So I thought I'd share it with you as today's podcast episode, because you may not be a YouTube person. You may be, and the reason why you're listening to podcasts, because might be your way to consume content, information. So why not bring it to you, and rather than having you go there? Now, I would not mind if you go there and watch, because I have illustrations and the points are being made. So you have more of a visual, and you can also do what I would encourage you to do when you go there, is to leave me to subscribe to this show, because that is one way to make certain that I have more eyeballs on it, and also it'll reach more people. So you'll hear in this episode 3 reasons why I think emotional safety is needed for a happy marriage. Now, before I share that with you, I'm asking you to do what I call a spousal honor. Yes, a spousal honor. You may never have heard that phrase before. You may have heard the phrase a gentleman's honor. Have you heard that? Well, whether you did or not, I'm going to explain. A spousal honor simply means that doing something to show your appreciation for getting incredible value from a podcast like this one, right? And this episode is as an example, all for free. Then a spousal honor is taking a few minutes to leave a rating and review on the platform on which you're listening to this podcast. I don't think that's too much to ask in return for what it is you're getting from this podcast, this episode. And I hope you'll agree with that. So I really make no apology to ask you to do that. And also to subscribe to the podcast. I really appreciate that. Now, to make sure you don't miss any other episodes in this series, subscribe to the show, like I mentioned before. And if you've missed any of the past episodes and you're wondering, how can I get access to that? Let me strongly encourage you to not only bookmark this podcast, but to go to happiermarriagesecrets.com/podcast, happiermarriagesecrets.com/podcast. And I'll provide the link in this episode as I do every other episode as well. Now, if this is the first time you're listening to me, let me say this. You may or may not agree with all that you'll hear. And quite frankly, I don't expect you to. Why? Because you are smart enough to figure some things out on your own and process, and not just necessarily take everything in robotically and not examine or process, or even sometimes find a way to disagree. And that's okay. That's part of the whole dialogue that I'm trying to create here in this podcast. I'm not the one who would say, hey, I don't like to have disagreement. No, I mean, that's the whole idea of a podcast episode, because I'm not going to say I'm right on everything. I'm right on some things, but I know that many people that I've counseled with and coached with over the years, hundreds and hundreds of couples who have had success in those sessions I've presented with them, or they work with them, or a coaching environment, I know that I do have some things that are helpful, because they would not have had the success they've had. So you might be triggered by some of what you'll hear on this episode, but remember, that's one of the purpose of this show. I can be a contrarian, as you may kind of pick up on so far. So I stir things up sometimes and take you in for what I call a solid landing. I'll always take you in for a solid landing. And you can always share your thoughts and comments on whatever you feel in what you're hearing. And I do encourage that I really encourage that. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com. Our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode. So stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage podcast. Today, as you've heard, we're talking about emotional safety and why it's needed for a happy marriage. Why it's needed for a happy marriage. And just to remind you that you can also watch this episode in the video format on my YouTube channel, and other topics I've covered there as well. And just go to Kingsley Grant, right? But when you go there, make sure you smash the subscribe button. Let's smash that button, the subscribe button. Click on the like button if you like what you hear, and the notification bell, so you'll be notified of any new episodes or video broadcasts that I put out. You can also get shorter versions of some of the points that I make here at my YouTube shorts, and make sure you subscribe. It's very important that you subscribe to the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing your name as the next addition to my subscription list. Will you do that today? I would really appreciate that. Again, let me simply say thanks for joining me for this episode. And as you've already heard, we're talking about that on the topic, emotional safety is needed for a happy marriage, and here is why. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode, which is the audio from my YouTube broadcast. Thanks for joining me on this broadcast. Today, we'll be unpacking the topic on how to create an emotionally safe space in your marriage. How to create an emotionally safe space in your marriage. So if you're married and you are looking to strengthen your marriage, your relationship, and deepen your connection, you've come to the right place. So in this video, what we're going to do is explore 3 ways that you can build emotional safety. And while doing that, you can deepen your emotional connection and build 2 very important aspects of all relationships, and that is trust and vulnerability. So being able to trust your partner, your spouse in the relationship. And I would just say simply have trust as that overarching umbrella over the relationship. How do you get trust to be that overarching umbrella in the relationship? And how do you become vulnerable, right? Because I believe a safe space creates that opportunity for you to even want to explore being vulnerable because you feel safe enough. Now, emotional safety means creating that environment where both of you, right, both you and your partner feel comfortable expressing yourselves without fear or judgment. I mean, fear of judgment or rejection. It means respecting the space and respecting each other's boundaries and needs and feelings. It means acknowledging what it is your partner is trying to communicate, because he or she's trying to say something to you, and sometimes it's challenging if you don't have an emotionally safe space to be able to hold space for that. Now, so let's dive then into today's topic: how to create an emotionally safe space in your marriage. By the way, if you would like to get instant feedback on the state of your marriage and what to do about it, then you need to take the Happier Marriage Assessment quiz. And you can do that in less than 90 seconds. And you will have an immediate score that kind of tells you, what number what category you'll fall into. And then you get a downloadable PDF that explains the score and explain the category that you may tend to fall in your marriage. Now, if this interests you, again, you can take a short quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz, happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz, and the link will be in the description that follows this video. So how do you create an emotionally safe space in your marriage? Now, that is the question, and this video will provide you with the answers, obviously. Now, emotional safety, simply put, is feeling secure enough to truly express yourself with someone, your partner, and show up as your most authentic self, right? It's where you don't have to hold back what you truly feel and need from the relationship. Right? Is where you just can be yourself. And how often I've heard a couple who may say, I just don't feel like I can be myself in my relationship. Is that you? If that's so, I'd love for you to comment below. If you've ever felt that, ever thought that you don't feel like you can be yourself in your relationship, comment below and let me hear what it is your experience have been. Or just say, I have experienced that myself. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on that. So here is the first of the three that I believe that ideas I want to share around this emotional safety. And that is to establish, which I think is very, it makes sense, right? Establish a safe and secure space. Number one, establish a safe and secure space. Now, creating a safe and secure space, as I mentioned, is a prerequisite. It's a must. It's a priority if you're ever going to be able to build trust and intimacy into your marriage. If you're ever going to be vulnerable and feel like you can be your authentic self and show up as you would like to show up, there's got to be that space where you feel comfortable and safe enough to be that way, right? It's that environment you're going to establish, you and your spouse establish, where you feel about, as I mentioned, comfortable enough to share your thoughts, your feelings, and emotions. How many couples, as I mentioned earlier, don't feel safe enough to want to even talk about the true feelings of their hearts, the true issues on their hearts, their concerns, their fear? It, especially for I mean, I know it happens for, of course, of male and female, but for guys, it's especially because we fear the idea of being seen less or weak, or somehow as well with this leader, the strong person. And then if we are going to step into a place and we feel the chance that we may not be acknowledged or received well, we're going to be hesitant. So having this safe environment is a priority for both, of course, both of you. Now, So for example, you have a place where you can have regular check-ins to see how each person is doing, sharing your thoughts and your feelings about things, and start there. And it could be over a cup of coffee or just on a walk. That could be a safe place for you, just to walk side by side. That's tend to be safe because you're not facing each other and somehow misreading certain cues. But if you're walking side by side and just downloading, sharing your thoughts, sharing your fears, sharing your what your concerns, and then you're actively listening. So once your partner is sharing, you have to actively listen. And you have already heard me share about active listening, and doing so without any judgment or criticism, or you're giving this person your full attention, right? That's one of the ways you can basically go about doing that. And also using healthy communication skills. For example, I statements instead of you statements. Instead of saying, you never listen to me, right? You could try saying, I feel unheard when we don't take time to talk. Or I feel unheard when we're having a conversation and somehow I don't have a chance to talk, right? You're not saying, you never listen to me, because people become defensive when they hear that. And so changing the way you approach even that conversation can be a major, a game changer, right? Number 2, deepen your emotional connection, right? Go deep. Now, deepen your emotional connection, and building trust and intimacy means understanding your partner's needs and feelings, right? And being able to communicate your own needs and your own feelings effectively. Again, which require, like I mentioned before, listening, but it's being able to listen to what's not being said, the tone, the heart, the angle from which they're coming from. And you can become curious even to ask questions. And you could even address and say, what I'm hearing is sadness, or I'm hearing hurt, or I'm hearing disappointment. You can even add that because your spouse knows you're listening and you're picking up on these things that they may not be saying, but you are drawing that out of them, right? When you're going deep, you're drawing those things out of them by listening carefully and being curious, asking questions. Tell me a bit more about that. What's that like? And empathizing with them at that point. For example, you show your partner is talking about their hobbies or their work, and you want to kind of participate by just engaging with them. Punctuations like, wow, man, I can't believe that. I can't imagine what that's like for you. That must be hard. Wow. Man, I just can't believe it. Just the nod in your head, kind of shaking your head, paying attention. Those are ways that you're communicating to your partner that you truly are, you're getting, you're engaging. So you're showing empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, and just kind of imagining, use your imagination. And that is really true, deeper communication. You're going deeper with your partner, and you're connecting at that level. Like I've said, heart to heart completes. Heart to heart completes. It connects. And so when you're in the head space, I say head to head competes. You're competing for who is going to rule the day in their conversation or their opinion, whose opinion is going to win. But when you speak like this and you're kind of acknowledging, what I've heard sometimes pushback from this is Kingsley, we don't talk that way. We just don't talk that way. We didn't grow up talking the way that you're suggesting. I'm saying, well, how is that working out for you? How is talking the way you talk have worked out for you? Is it working? Well, if it's working, then keep on doing that. But if it's not working, you may want to change how you're talking, right? Now, before I share with you the third way, and I'd like for you to comment and let me know how your thoughts about what I've just said. Have you experienced that? Have you heard that? Have you said that, we don't talk that way? We don't even communicate that way. Well, this might be the time for you to start changing. So comment below and let me hear your thoughts on this. And so number 3 is build trust and vulnerability. Now, this is the third step in building intimacy into your marriage. It means being open and honest. Now, if you have a very safe environment where you can be open and honest and you don't feel judged or criticized, then you're going to feel trusting of the environment to be vulnerable and share deeper things. And this is where you've got to be so careful that when your partner is getting in this space, is raw, is an open wound. You don't want to add salt to that. You don't want to add anything that brings more pain. It's painful enough for them to be sharing and being so vulnerable. Vulnerability is not easy. Anyone who says vulnerability is easy have not really been vulnerable enough. It's not easy. Now, you can get better at it. You can develop your vulnerability muscle, that it becomes easier over time, but it's going to be where both persons mutually create that space for that muscle to be worked out properly. As an example, it could be something you're struggling with, and something you're afraid of, and you want to share that with your partner. So you want to be open and honest about what it is that you're going through, so that relationship provides that context for that. And then you come alongside and you're encouraging your partner by what I shared earlier about the punctuations and the way you can lean in to that moment for them, right? Your partner may have needs of you. I shared in a past video about how to be there for your partner in tough times. And you can, see that in the videos that I have shared. Actually, I'll probably share the link down below where you can see that video yourself. So you're being there for your partner in time of need. And it is so important because this also strengthens the relationship. So these three ways, I believe, to build deeper connection and intimacy and establish a safe environment, a safe, emotional safe space. Number one, you've got to then, as I said, create that space. Number two, go deeper. And number three, it is about your vulnerability. So it's build trust and vulnerability. Now, building trust and intimacy into your marriage takes effort and time, as you can just imagine, as you may have experienced in yourself, but it is worth it. So by following these steps I've outlined, you can create a deeper and more meaningful connection with your spouse, and your relationship will become stronger, more fulfilling, and happier as a result of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, you can see all the links mentioned today in the description below, and also a free gift I have for you will be in the link below. Now, with that said, my friend, let's go and make marriages happier again. And there you have it, my friend. I hope you were able to find great value from this episode. And if you did, I'd like to hear from you. As you can probably pick up on by now, that I like to interact with you. So make sure I hear from you on this. One of the ways to do that is to leave a rating and a review on the platform, as I mentioned before, in which you're listening to this podcast, or DM me, right? Send me a direct message on social media. I would love to interact with you and hear your thoughts, any additional ideas you may have, or something you may have a question about, or maybe you may be in disagreement. I would love to engage with you in any of those above mentioned ways I've just described. Secondly, if you'd like to watch the YouTube version with illustrations, then head over to my YouTube channel and just simply search for Kingsley Grant, and you'll find it there, as well as many other topics that I've covered. Make sure you subscribe when you do. And if you've not yet checked out the new website, happiermarriagesecrets.com, let me encourage you to do that, because you'll find blog posts and you'll also find the podcasts, all the ones that I've done so far. It's all there for your convenience, all in one spot. So head over there. By the way, all the links I'm mentioning will be in the description that follows this podcast episode. So you can always go there and click on that and go to where I'm asking you to go. Also, let me remind you to take the Happier Marriage Assessment Quiz that will score your marriage and give you the results immediately, as well as a PDF that explains the results of the quiz that you've just taken. It's an assessment, very short, under 90 seconds, and boom, you're finished with that. You can access the quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz, happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz, and the link will also be in the description of this episode. So thanks again, my friend, for listening, and the announcer will tell you how to get a free gift just for staying to the end. Now let's go and make marriages happier again.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.